So first of all, thank you. We have today Ajay Krishnan, who is actually was a fighter pilot in Indian Navy. So in this interview, we'll be basically trying to understand what was his motivation to join Indian Navy, how was the life in academy, various learning that he has while he was working Indian Navy, and what are the various life lessons that he's actually using in this current civil world. So that is something which we'll be closely discussing. So first of all, Ajay sir, thank you for accepting the invite and coming on
You're
this
welcome.
interview.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be in your channel, and I see that you have a lot of subscribers. So that's really good. That means that a lot of people are interested in joining the forces. That's something really nice to know.
Thank you, sir. So first question to you would be, so how does it feel to be actually flying an aircraft faster than the speed of sound? How does it feel to be a fighter pilot? That's my first question to you.
Well, it's definitely out of this world, if you ask me, because the experience itself is very unique. You know, number one is the speed. That's one. Then on top of that, you're flying with a lot of stress on your body. Like for example, you are going through a lot of G's, right? The acceleration due to gravity that's going through your body, and you are sometimes at 5 to 6 G, sometimes even 7.5 Gs when you are in air combat exercises, etc. So it's definitely a feeling that cannot be really explained in words, but I would definitely say that it's something you'll never forget.
True, sir. So, sir, what was your motivation to join Indian Navy? Because I know you are coming from a Sainik school, and what actually made you to join Indian Navy and not other forces? What was your motivation?
Right. So I'm a native of Kerala. And I've always lived next to the water. You know, I've always lived in coastal areas, which is something that I really like. So back in Kerala, you know, they have a really big naval base in Kochi. And my native place was very close to Kochi. And whenever we would go to Kochi, you know, for some kind of shopping and things like back in the day, you didn't have so many stores. So you had to go to like a major city to do your shopping. And you would do that maybe once in a month. And we would all see, we would pass in front of the naval base, like whether we are on a bus or a car or something like that. And we will see a lot of people walking around in the white uniform. So the white uniform definitely attracted me a lot. Secondly, my grandfather was a soldier in the British Indian Army during the Second World War. He's still alive. He's one of the oldest living World War II veterans in India. So I grew up listening to his stories. Stories were very, very inspirational, and those were the ones, two major reasons. What made me want to join the military, and of course, the reason why I wanted to join the Navy was because of the white uniform and also the prospect of being at sea. You know, that is something that I've always really fantasized about, going out into the water.
So my next question would be, how was your experience of SSB back then? How did you prepare your life in the Sainik school? We had an earlier discussion that you were trained for the NDA entries, right? You were trained that you can clear SSBs and get into the armed forces. So how was that experience of SSB preparation and everything?
Right. So since we were already in a Sainik school, you know, we had almost 7 years of training, because you join at the age of 10 in class 6, and then you passed out at the age of 17 in class 12. So it's almost 7 years of training that you undergo, both academic, physical, mental, emotional, everything. So in 12th standard, before you write your UPSC exam, the entrance exam, you have kind of like a training program that they do. So this was very helpful for me. I mean, I was generally pretty good with academics, so didn't have a lot of issues clearing the UPSC exam per se. And we also had the opportunity of training with an ex-GTO, so Group Task Officer of the SSB, who happened to be a principal back then. His name was Colonel Ramanaya. So he also did a lot of coaching classes for us, the people who cleared the entrance exam in the first place. That really helped us, you know, tackling the TAT, tackling the group tasks, tackling the interview. And that makes a lot of difference. Taking guidance from somebody who's already gone through it, it does give you a lot of insights, and at the same time makes you aware of what you're going to go through. And if you're prepared that way, then I think that most boys of that age will be able to get through to the interview. But of course, you need to make it to the merit list as well after that.
Okay, so how was your journey in the SSB? Which SSB you went for, and
Right.
how was the whole experience?
I went to 10 SSB in Bangalore. That was for the Navy. There, what we did was initially, you go there, you have a preliminary exam from which almost 30% or 40% of the people are sent back after that. That is very similar to all these bank PO exams that you'll find, these kind of intelligence exams, how to find patterns, those kind of questions. So those are fairly easy, if it depends on your preparation as well. Those are fairly easy. And once you clear that, then you go to the next stage. And that is when the real SSB starts. So in my case, it started with the thematic apperception test, the test where you have to write about a picture that is shown, basically a story about the picture. So, something that I always made sure I did was being positive in whatever I wrote or whatever I said. So even if, for example, in that test, you had a picture that showed an accident, for example, like there is blood or something like that, you never narrate that in a negative way. You always narrate the story in a positive way as much as possible. The same thing goes for, when a word is given to you and you have to form a sentence. Even then, you have to always make sure that the sentence is 100% positive. Don't write anything that is not positive in there. So that is something that I did correctly in my initial test. Then you go to the group tasks, right? Group tasks and the group discussion stage, it is very important to understand your teammates. You need to make sure what is the hierarchy that you're going into. There's always going to be that one person who's going to hijack most of the conversation. So you need to know who that person is. And you need to make sure that you don't let that person hijack the conversation. You need to butt in and say that, okay, I agree with you, but I also want to give my opinion, which is this, for example. So you need to understand that. And then you need to understand the person who's really quiet. And you have to encourage that person to come into the conversation in a group discussion. This is also noticed by the group task officers. It's very, very important. So you are actually trying to lift somebody up. Now, this is a quality that is, very much required for a military officer. So these are subtle things that you don't get from a lot of SSB coaching centers. And I'm not sure, I didn't go to a proper SSB coaching center myself, but these things really help you out. And after that, I'm sure that you have some physical tests, etc., which are fairly easy to complete, even for an average boy of that age of 17, 18, 19 years of age. It's fairly easy to complete. It's not a big deal at all. You just need to be generally fit. You don't need to be you don't need to come from a science school for that. I'm sure you know that. And then finally, the interview. Now, by the interview, you have to understand that the decision has already been made, whether you cleared the SSB or not. And interview is more about understanding that final touches about how you are. So here also you need to make sure that you're very positive. You answer the questions in a very positive manner. If you don't know the answer, please don't try to beat around the bush. Just tell the president that, I'm sorry, sir, I do not know the answer to this. And that is probably the best way that you can face a question to which you don't know the answer about. I've heard a lot of people trying to beat around the bush and then getting into deeper and deeper trouble, because they're going to ask you a question. They're going to understand that you're lying. So never do that.
Yeah. So what I understand, this was your first attempt at, I think, 12 SSB Bangalore, and you got recommended.
Yes, that's right. 12 SSB Bangalore, it was my first attempt. And I also ranked 62. All India rank.
Okay. So will you be able to tell us which year was this?
This was in 2004. 2004.
Okay.
So I was the course NDA.
Okay. So you went into NDA, then you would have gone to INA, right? Indian Naval Academy. So how was your?
No, back then it was not like that. Back then you finished 3 years in the NDA. And then you finish 6 months of cadet training on a training ship.
Okay.
So there used to be a ship called INS Tir, on which you would do your cadet training.
Okay.
So you would do that for 6 months, while the Army counterparts would do the term in IMA at this point. And then in the Navy, after you do your cadet training, you become something called as a midshipman. A midshipman, and then that is considered equivalent to an officer rank in the Navy. However, back in the Army and the Air Force, you're still a cadet back then. And then, I mean, as a midshipman, you can dine in the officer's mess. You can go to the officer's canteen and things like that. Whereas in the Army and the Air Force, it is different. And then you get commissioned as a sub-lieutenant back then. So I got commissioned in 2008.
Okay. So how was life at the NDA, National Defense Academy? So if you have some memories which you would like to share.
Yes, absolutely. So it was, first of all, I went to a squadron called Hunter, and it is one of the most difficult squadrons to be out there. I would say that life was difficult in the first 2 terms. It wasn't easy at all, but it was positive, you know. It was you were being prepared positively for the life that lay ahead. And now that, since it is a tri-service institution, Army training is kind of like the base. So you can't be like, oh, wait a second, I'm going to the Navy, I don't need to know the drill procedures, you know. You need to know that because this is a tri-services institution. So that's what we did. And starting from 3rd term onwards, it was, I would say it slightly got better as you become more responsibilities. I was a fairly good sportsman because of my Sainik school background, so I didn't have any issues with that. With running and things like that, I was okay. But I was not a really swimmer, so that was a place where I had a lot of challenge. But I managed to clear all my tests and everything. And once I got into the Navy, of course, my swimming improved because that was something core to the naval training. You know, swimming was a very core activity.
So how did flying happen to you? Basically, how did selection of flying happens in Indian Navy? How did they select that these cadets be going for flying, or these will go for ships? How does this happen?
Right. So there is one entry in the Navy called short service aviation entry. This is for short service officers, and they go directly into aviation. You know, there is nothing else for them. They are just being picked only for being pilots. Then, whereas the other entry, now I don't know about today's entry system because it has changed a lot in the past 10 years or so. In our case, we used to go in as general service Navy officers. And once you were doing your, there is something called as YOs, Young Officers Courses. In the Navy, it's called Sub-Lieutenant Tech Courses. While we do that, you know, you can give your choice. Like you want to go into submarines, you want to go into aviation, you want to become an engineer, for example, or you want to stay in general service. You can give your options. Now, depending on your merit, you will be picked to go to different of these branches. And once you go for aviation, you have certain tests that you need to complete. You know, like you have a PABT, like the Air Force guys go through. Then you have your medicals and all those things. And finally, at the end, if your merit is good, you are selected for something called as a PFT, pre-flight training. In pre-flight training, you are put through all the ground subjects, you know, aerodynamics, avionics, meteorology, all these things. You put through that, and you need to come at a certain merit. Like, for example, if there are 20 seats for naval pilots, you need to come in that 20, and there will be 30 people competing. So once that is done and your name comes in the merit list, then you'll be sent to AFA, Air Force Academy, to do your basic flying. And once you do your basic flying from Air Force Academy, that is a 6-month course. And then, you know, from Air Force Academy itself, you will get to know whether you're going to fighters or you're going to maritime reconnaissance, which is equivalent to transport in the Air Force, or you're going for helicopters. So that happens at the Air Force Academy. So the top guys in the merit, they go for fighters.
Okay. So my question would be, within Indian Navy, what were the aircraft which you are flying in Indian Navy?
Right. So in the Air Force Academy, we started with an aircraft called the HPT-32. And during our pilot course, they decided to change that aircraft because they had some technical issues with it. So it was changed to the HJT-16 Kiran Mark 1 aircraft. So we flew that. We flew both of them. I soloed on Kiran. Then after that was over, since I went into fighters in the Navy back then, the top 2 fighter pilots from the Navy would be trained with the US Navy. So I was sent deputation to the US. And there I flew 2 different aircraft called Beechcraft Turbo Mentor. That was made by the Beechcraft company. And then the T-45 Goshawk, which was made by the Boeing company. So these 2 aircraft, I got to fly there with the US Navy. And once I graduated and came back to India, then here in India, I flew an aircraft called the Hawk Mark 132, made by British Aerospace. It's called B Hawk Mark 132, yeah.
Okay, got it, sir. So, sir, while you're flying in Indian Navy, do you have any experience of any memorable moments with respect to your experience during the Navy?
Well, one of the most memorable moments for any pilot is the first time you go solo on a particular aircraft. So that's definitely memorable for me. And it was a challenging time as well. Then there is one experience I remember, which was flying overseas. The first time I flew overseas in India, we did it over the Bay of Bengal, and that was a very, very fascinating experience. To fly, in your own exclusive economic zone on top of the water. That is a very memorable moment.
Okay, so sir, I would like to understand, as a pilot in Indian Navy, what were your roles and responsibility, and what was your one day looks like as a pilot?
Right. So of course, the primary responsibility is always to fly the aircraft and fly the mission that is assigned to you. There's always secondary responsibilities as well. For example, you will have to take care of some of the admin requirements of the squadron. You might have to take over the HR responsibilities for that. The particular designation is called as a regulating officer. Then there are officers who are given responsibilities as the flight safety officer. It's something like risk assessment, making sure that the flight safety standards of the squadron remains at the topmost level that it needs to be. So my ideal day would look like I would wake up at about 4:30 in the morning, because we would have a briefing at 5:30 a.m. Because the skies are very clear early in the morning. And I was posted in a place called Visakhapatnam. So of course it's on the eastern coast of India. So sunrise is early there. So we used to have a briefing at 5:30. We used to have our mission specific briefing after that. And then we would start flying by about 6:20, 6:25 a.m. There would be flying going on till about 1:32 till lunchtime, completely non-stop. It happens in batches. So the first batch will fly at maybe 6:30 to about 8. The second batch will fly from 10 to 11:30, and the third batch will fly from 12:30 to 13:30. 1:30 p.m. or 2:30 p.m. Then after lunch, it's probably the time that we utilize for our paperwork and our admin stuff. Also, we do some studying. We conduct some theoretical classes for the junior pilots and for the staff pilots as well. And finally, we would be done by about 5:30 or so. And then, because we would be done earlier than that, but then we have to spend some time with the troops. We have to spend some time with the technicians, the sailors, who make sure that our aircraft are kept well maintained. So we spend some time with them. Maybe we'll play with them for some time. We'll have an hour of games. We'll speak to them, have a heart-to-heart conversation about their problems, issues, and everything. And we'll be done by about 5:30 or so. Go home.
Okay, got it. So, sir, you have been in Indian Navy for at least more than a decade. So, how was your experience, and what are the various learnings that you got from Indian Navy, which you are currently also using in your current civil jobs?
Right. So, see, these things become secondary nature to you. They are habits that you pick up over such a long time. And as they say, old habits die hard. So, for example, waking up early in the morning, just giving you an example, it is something that I've been doing since my Sainik school days. Now, it comes automatically to me. I don't need to make too much of an effort to wake up early in the morning. Second thing would be having a certain routine to your day, having your breakfast at a certain time, having your lunch, dinner at a certain time, making some time for working out, keeping yourself fit. Then learning new things in a day, reading, these kind of things are habits that have formed over a period of time, and I still utilize it. And it gives me immense pleasure to say that in times like this, during the lockdown, having a routine is very, very important. And I didn't really need any external requirement or assistance to have my routine in place, because I've already had it in place. And even in the job in the corporate sector, being disciplined helps you a lot. And it's very much appreciated by senior management in most companies when you're disciplined and when you're able to stick to the timings. You're not late. You're always present where you need to be. You turn up with your work requirements, your assignments, whatever work that has been given to you. So these kind of things are all secondary nature for any soldier, for that matter, not just me. I'm nothing special. So, and secondly, I would say that being a fighter pilot is all about working under stress. So it really helps when you are in a stressful condition like now. Business is dull and a lot of pressure on a lot of people, to achieve their targets and things like that. So this is a place where I thrive. I thrive when there is stress and pressure on me. So that really helps.
Since you're talking about stress, how do you used to handle stress back then and even now? What is the difference? Is there any secret of handling this stress? Because stress is actually very common nowadays, right? How do you handle that?
Yes. So I would say that the stress in the corporate sector is slightly different from the stress you have as a military officer, primarily because lives depend on you, unlike in the corporate sector. So if you are leading men, if I am leading my squadron of troops, I can't be under so much stress that I'm endangering their lives. Now, this is something you always have it in your mind. Now, this is more applicable to army officers, who are really leading men in the battlefield. I also have to keep in mind that when I'm flying with my wingman, for example, if I'm getting under so much of stress, I might make a mistake in my flying. And that will endanger him as well, because he's flying like right beside me at about 100 feet away. So I need to always keep that in mind. And that really helps. When you take stress and put it into a higher frame of reference, then you just feel that, ye to kuch nahi hai, this is just a very small thing, and then you also interact with a lot of people who are going through even worse. Then you feel like, no, not really. My stress is comparatively okay and manageable. And in the military, you don't really have a choice. You have to come up with ways with which you can deal with stress. Sometimes your friends help you, your fellow officers, they help you, your family helps you, and you are more forthcoming to take help from them, because you know that the things that you are going through can only be understood by that particular group of people. So for example, if you're not part of that group, it's going to be very difficult for me to explain that to you, like what I'm going through. So we have our own ways of coping with it. We have our own counseling centers within the military for these kind of stress issues that we make use of, very qualified people who come there. So I would suggest that if you're in the corporate sector, you're going through stress, you have to see that from a bigger frame of reference. And then you will understand that this particular stress that is affecting you is very manageable. It's nothing too bad. You have food on the table, you have a job, or you have your good health. That itself is a big blessing for most of us. So it really doesn't make sense to worry that much about stress, if that makes sense.
Got it, sir. So we spoke about reading habits. So I just want to know, what kind of books do you read, the genre, and if you'd like to suggest some books.
Absolutely. So I do read a lot of books on improving and bettering oneself. Now, I wouldn't say completely self-help, because that genre is, it's very big and vast. I look at authors, mainly authors who have done something remarkable in their lives, and what I can learn from them. That is what I look at. So there's one book that I'm currently reading. It's called Atomic Habits. It's a very popular book nowadays. It's written by a person called James Clear. That's what I'm currently reading. Then I've also read a lot of books about how to speak and how to Influence Your Audience by Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek is also a very popular author. Then I do used to read a lot of fiction, especially by Michael Crichton. He was one of my favorite authors because it never seemed like fiction, because 5 years that book would look like, oh, he was probably writing about reality. That is one. Then I do read a lot online, blogs, especially on Medium. There are so many authors that put out a lot of value out there. I do write as well on Medium. And sometimes autobiographies of eminent people in the field of business, in the field of public service. There's a lot to learn from those biographies.
Right. So since this interview will be seen mostly by the SSB aspirants who are actually subscribed to my channel, so my question would be, what will be your suggestion to them? How do they handle the SSB selection system? Because some will get through, some will not get through. Failures will happen, and how do they handle these things? So your suggestion.
I understand. Primarily, I want to tell all of you is not to lose hope. That is number one. You are going to look at the syllabus and you're going to be like, "Arey yaar, itna to padna hai. It's beyond my reach." That itself is probably the worst mistake that you can do. The most difficult part is sitting down and starting the process. Do it very, very incrementally. Try to put maybe half an hour to start with in the morning, then increase it to 1 hour, increase it to 2 hours every day. And you can put 2 hours every day consistently. You will be able to complete your entire syllabus within a period of 4 to 5 months. Okay. And the UPSC exam and the SSB is there to find out who the real you is, the real personality behind you. So do not be a showpiece to them. Don't try to show off. Don't try to beat around the bush when you are asked a question. If you don't know something, answer very confidently. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know. But I will find out and get back to you." That is the right attitude. And always, always, always make sure that you keep a positive attitude. Anything that you say, you write in the SSB, in the course, the moment you walk into the SSB center, you need to be a very positive person, because you're being watched, you're being observed by the GTOs, and you're also being sized up by your other competitors along with you. And if they like you, then let me assure you that your SSB will definitely go much easier. Be a team player. Don't try to boss around. Don't try to show that you know everything and they don't know anything else. Never do that. Especially when it comes to your group task, that is where you need to put maximum effort in, because being in the military is all about being in a team. If you're not able to perform in a group, then you probably are not the right material for the army or the armed forces. So that is something that you need to keep in mind all the time. Okay. And in the interview, like I said, be who you are. Don't lie or don't try to beat around the bush. Just be honest with whatever you know. Don't try to show off something that you don't know, because nobody is expected to know everything. And a lot of things in the military can be taught to you, and it will be taught in the academies. So don't worry about that.
So one more question. When we go to SSB, there's something called OLQ, officer-like qualities. So once you get rejected, most of the officer will tell you, you know what, you have to introspect, and somewhere you need to understand what went wrong and then work on them. So what exactly do you think by introspection? What does it mean? And how can we actually improve our officer-like qualities? If you have any suggestions for that.
Yes, absolutely. So officer-like qualities refers to a bunch of traits that you as a person need to have. Now, the most important ones are always going to be honesty, integrity, these kind of qualities, because these qualities cannot be taught to you. It has to be there within you. If it is not there, then it's going to be very difficult for you to qualify SSB. And so it is not just one or two qualities. It is as a package, right? When somebody looks at you, so you look at a military officer, you know immediately he's a military officer. How does that happen? That is because these OLQ or the officer-like qualities are staring at you. So it's very difficult to teach each one of them. Some of them are teachable, like for example, your soft skills, the way you speak to others, the way you're respectful, the way you respect women, the way you respect ladies. That shows a lot about your character. Are you showing respect to people who can't make a difference to your life? That is also OLQ. Are you being respectful in a team? Are you able to work in a team? Are you able to speak in such a way that you are able to command respect from your peers? You know, that is OLQ. Are you groomed? Are you groomed well? Because see, an officer cannot be ungroomed, unshaven, and out of shape, and nobody's going to think that he's an officer in the first place. Because I'm sure you also would have come across some officers, and you meet them, and you're like, "Arey, yaar, ye officer lagta hi nahi hai." Sometimes it happens, right? So it really can't be taught, but there are books that you can use. I can't recall any books as of now, but there are books definitely on OLQ that you can read. But I would suggest that start with honesty, integrity, and the way you interact and speak with your teammates, your peers. You need to be respectful. At the same time, you need to be able to command some respect.
Question would be, you have been flying so many planes. Which one of them is your favorite, or what do you think? This is the plane that I wanted to fly. Is it anything like that?
Nothing like that. I mean, I always consider it as opportunity given to me. I mean, I was lucky because, like you said, you're not the only one who had the ambition to be a fighter pilot. It has been me, and it is said that almost 30 to 40% of the entire male population in the world at some point wanted to be a pilot. So this is a dream that a lot of people have. So I always found it very lucky within myself that I had the opportunity to fly even a single aircraft for that matter. But I would say that the Hawk definitely was one of my favorites. It was a beautiful aircraft to fly, very smooth, technologically advanced, right up there with the rest of the aircraft. So that is something that I really enjoyed flying.
Any military specific movie which you have watched, which has inspired you a lot, or which you think is very close to the way we live? It can be any Hollywood or movie.
Well, like a lot of people, I love the movie Top Gun, and I'm waiting for the second part to be out in December. At the same time, there are a few other movies, like for example, Shaurya is a really good military movie from Bollywood. It is very well made. Lakshya is another movie. In fact, I remember watching it in my first term in NDA. Watching Lakshya, it released in 2004, by the way. So that is a really good movie. Recently, I really wouldn't say I've come across a lot of good Bollywood movies. Border is definitely one of my favorites. I watched it as a young boy when I was in 7th or 8th grade. Then there is another movie called 1917. I'm sure you might have heard of it. It's a Hollywood movie that released last year, I think, or maybe early this year. It's about an operation during the First World War. Very, very touching. The entire movie is taken in one take. Entire movie. So that is a very interesting movie as well.
Okay. So my last question would be to you is, say, since you are a pilot, what are the various subjects, topics which a particular SSB aspirant should know about planes? Because I know when I went to ND SSB, I was asked a lot of questions on aircraft, Bernoulli, how would aircraft fly, how will it fly when it's upside down, all those questions. So what do you think should one prepare for?
See, Bernoulli's principle is the basics of flight. Okay, without Bernoulli's principle, we wouldn't have aircraft. Bernoulli's principle is also taught, I think, in physics in the 11th or 12th grade. So when you're taking the UPSC exam after your 12th grade, you are supposed to know, you're expected to know these concepts that you learned up to then. But other than that, you really don't have to learn much about aircraft per se, because that will be taught to you during your pre-flight training. Nobody's going to ask you, how does an aircraft fly upside down, or how is a lift created when that happens? Nobody's going to ask you that, trust me. It is much higher in level for that. But when you're going for SSB, you definitely need to know what you learned up to your 12 standard. You need to be quite thorough with that, because if you cleared a UPSC exam, that means that you were thorough. That's the reason you cleared it. So such questions might be asked in your SSB as well, but they're generally not very difficult, So you don't have to worry much about it. If you want to be a pilot, just make sure that you clear your exams and go step by step. At a certain step, which is a pre-flight training, you will be expected to go into detail about aerodynamics, avionics, how an airspeed indicator works, how a radar works, all these things. So of course, then you'll have to learn about it and study it well to answer the questions. But when you're going for an SSB, I don't think anything will be asked to you that is not covered in your 11th and 12th standard.
Next question would be basically, there is a myth that Navy pilots are better than Air Force pilots. So how true or false is that? Or should we even consider this conversation?
See, I don't think there's much of a difference between Navy and Air Force pilots. We all have our own missions to complete, which are probably more difficult than others. However, I would say that flying over sea is a very unique thing. Flying over sea at very low levels. Not all Air Force pilots get to do that. Only the maritime squadrons do that. Second thing is that Navy pilots get to land on carriers, which is supposed to be one of the most difficult and dangerous things to do. Now that is something the Air Force cannot do because, of course, Air Force is not supposed to operate from carriers, right? I would say that that's the only edge that I see as a naval aviator, because I was fortunate enough to land on an aircraft carrier, and it was probably one of the best feelings, and also what I consider as my. So that is the only area where I would say that Navy pilots are better than Air Force pilots, and also our uniform looks slightly better.
So when it comes to a pilot, the physical fitness is very important. So
yes.
What exactly do you suggest so that the physical fitness is still intact? So what is your suggestion?
So being a pilot or even a regular military officer, you need to keep your weight between certain limits. You can't have your weight cross a certain limit, because that is going to be very difficult for you, especially when it comes to promotions and things like that. So I would suggest to do a mix of aerobic and anaerobic activities. Aerobic meaning running, swimming, these kind of activities, play sports to keep yourself in shape, and definitely hit the gym once in a while. You don't need to be very muscular and things like that, but definitely you need to have strength in your arms, in your abdomen, things like that when you're being a pilot. And I would definitely advise to stay away from smoking and excessive drinking. That is definitely not going to be good for you. Especially smoking is not going to be good for you if you want to be a pilot, especially a fighter pilot. It's not that great.
Okay, sir. I would like to ask you 3 life lessons from your whole journey, ever since Sainik School, Academy, and now that you're in civil life. So 3 life lessons which you would like to share with aspirants so that they get motivated too.
Right. I would say that the first lesson that I learned was to never give up. That is definitely the first lesson that I learned, right from Sainik School to NDA to Navy, and even in the corporate sector. The moment you think of giving up, all that effort that you put in just goes to waste. And nobody wants to hear how much effort you put in. Everybody wants to see the results, right? You need to persist with your efforts to finally get to that point where the result is visible to everyone. So that is my first life lesson. Second is that you are going to come across challenges. Nobody is going to give you anything in a platter to you, take this. Everything is going to come with its own challenges. You have 2 options. One is to take on the challenge, and one is to give up, not attempt the challenge in the first place. I would say that definitely attempt the challenge. Even if you think you're going to fail, attempt the challenge, because now you have the experience of taking on a new challenge. And next time it comes to you, you're going to be much better at it because of the experience. The third life lesson is to stay humble as much as possible. Stay grounded. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you are the most hotshot pilot in the world. It can all be lost in a second. So make sure that you're humble and you're always grounded. Stay down to earth. Make sure that you're helping others. Like for example, when you came to me, I just wanted to help because it is for a bigger cause, right? If I can help your viewers, I can help somebody who's aspiring to be a pilot or aspiring to be a military officer. If I can even contribute that much to that particular person's life, I think that it is a day well spent. So those are the 3 life lessons I've taken, and I try to reflect them on my corporate career as well.
Okay, got your point, sir. So, sir, it was really nice talking to you, and I learned a lot about you and how Indian Navy works basically, and a life of fighter pilot, of course. So, thanks a lot for your time and your views on Indian Navy and all the other things that we discussed today. I hope this
Sure. It was
video
my
and
pleasure.
yeah, same here, sir. So, thanks a lot, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jai Hind. Bye.
So,